hopefully some folks from our Discord community are going to be able to pop up. We shall see. Sound alerts are not going to work. I don't have any of the that would have been good though. I'm sure that would have scared me. I don't have the sound alert stuff in there. I don't know if I can disable that for now or something. Maybe. Let me see. I figured this is going to be a little bit clunky just because I haven't done this in so long. So what I'm doing tonight, let me back up from that. What we have going on right now is the novella's been done for some time, but we've been working on the book design. And then throughout the course of the book design, we decided to put the first half of one of the short stories that's going to be in the short story book later. We decided to put half of one of those stories, Storm Runners, at the end of the novella, Murder in the Shallow Valley. So, we decided to put that at the end and kind of entice people, hopefully, to learn even more about the world of Kethar. So what I'm doing tonight is it needed finishing polish, because it was just a little bit better, slightly better than a rough draft. So we've been working on that one, and then through the course of working on that one, Dawn did her first read. Actually, she did her first read of Storm Runners and pointed out that it started pretty slowly. So we wrote a new first section of that short story to sort of speed things up and more quickly let everyone know a few interesting things about the storm and make it a little more exciting to start with. So that's what we've been working on. We've been working on getting that one, even though it's just the first half of it, we still need to get it more polished than what it was, because it was an early draft. Now, at least half of it is pre-editor or almost pre-editor, like where I'd be ready to hand it over to the editor. I'm sure I'm still going to find other things between now and the time that the short story book actually gets edited, but I got to get it at least done well enough that we feel good about putting it at the end of the novella. Just like I had Dawn help me out, just if anybody has issues with the sound or anything like that, let me know for sure. Since I'm not even using our old setup that we use for when Dawn does painting on stream, everything's new, and I've just been sort of piecemealing in stuff as I go along the last couple of weeks. Maybe I've been playing with these new scenes, but okay. So what we're doing, since I talked about what's been going on, what I'm doing tonight is I believe that new first section is up with the rest of the first half of the book, and that it's almost ready to show to an editor kind of draft, right? So all I'm doing tonight is I'm going to give it another once over. Probably in a little while I'll do, or maybe as part of my once over, I'm thinking I might read that first section out loud. So we'll see how that goes. But that's what the plan is for tonight. I'm just going to kind of hang out, chat, answer any questions about the plane, our project, the plane, the novella, Murder in the Shallow Valley. Further questions after I read. Maybe people have questions about Storm Runners. Yeah, I'm just kind of willing to talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about with regards to the project, the world, the gaming expectations, stuff like that. Right now, we haven't even started outside of dossiers on things that we expect to include in the world. We haven't even started. In fact, we haven't even found a game, done a game test. We have a couple of game systems in mind that we're going to try out once we get to that point. But for now, we're just writing the stories so that the stories are ready when the time comes that people are going to actually be playing tabletop role-playing games with this world, then they'll already have these stories in place that they can use to build their campaigns on. That's the bulk of what we're going to do tonight. I might show off a little bit of the interior design. I don't think I've ever done that except for a recent video that we did for patrons, and that it is available now on the Plane, the YouTube channel for the Plane 2. Let me get that so I can share that. There's a link in chat if anybody wants to go over and sub onto the YouTube channel. That this isn't the, if you're already a member of or already following the Crypt Monkey Studios YouTube channel, this is actually a different channel. This channel's just going to be for everything Cathar. And for anybody that wants to follow it, to click on there if you see this video as a video later. It's youtube.com / at the at symbol, the Plane of Cathar. So I use a little bit of AI generation, and recently the one that I like to play with is Leonardo. And recently I went over there. It'd been a while since I'd been on there, and I saw that they have this quick animation tool. I don't remember what it's called. This animation tool for the renderings that you create with AI, and I thought this one was fun. This is well, in the foreground and the background we have plague doctors, which is going to be an adventuring career in the world. Plague doctors are kind of like alchemists on Cathar. They use things to adjust themselves, adjust people temporarily, but they're a pretty neat class. They're not a well-loved archetype in the world, but I think they're going to be a fun class to play, a fun adventuring career to play. So that's why this little video is playing. I just thought it would be neat to kind of have that going on in the background. Well, you know what? I think I will show some of the book design stuff. I've done a little bit of this recently for patrons. So hopefully I've got everything open appropriately too. So this is InDesign. This is what we use. This is what we use to do our design, our book design. It's from Adobe. The first thing I'll point out here is, yay, we've got this wonderful font. That font was an adventure, it seemed like, just to get that done. You know what? Actually, okay, so I'm going to show you a bit of the book design, but before we actually start looking at the internal matter, I think I've got this pulled up. Okay. Yeah. So here's our book cover. This is without all of the title and everything applied to it, but this is the artwork that we're using for the cover. This was by Sid Quaid, an artist out of Kansas City. So I'm pretty excited. That's a picture here from the story. This is an odd-looking land ship. I'll explain why it's odd in a moment. Being pulled by the dog ox named Snorts, and that is Tara Olds walking beside him. It's an odd-looking land ship for a couple of reasons. Number one, that's tiny. You find out in the course of the story that Tara Olds has basically stripped her land ship down to almost nothing. Like, this has fenders around the wheels and stuff, right? And that's not a normal... Land ships don't typically have fenders because their walls extend out past the wheels. And typically, the land ship is just a big square box. 2 stories, not this 1 story. This is pretty much what remains of what she stripped off, is this 1 story that is shrunk down all the way around as well. But yeah, we're excited. This cover's going to be fun. I hope it plays well on book sales. Obviously, covers are very important. And I know the ideal, through all of my research, the ideal way of doing this is you go and find out what's working in your genre and you copy it. So I'm hoping that other people are going to come see what we do and copy us. Because this is not what's going on in any of the genres that we're looking at for the book. The genres we're looking at for the book would be sci-fi, western, fantasy, horror. Yeah, nobody's doing things like this for their cover art, and we may find out that there's a reason why, but man, I love this. I hope it works. But no, this is intentionally not following the trends, and hopefully will stand out for that rather than get passed by. We'll see. So yeah, Terra Olds and Snorts pulling a tiny land ship through the plane. So, and feel free if anybody's got questions as we go along or whatever, just holler. We will answer whatever we can. So this is our internal title page. I'm gonna kind of buzz through some of this stuff here. We've got our legal stuff and the art's by who did our editing, and all exciting to be able to bring in people that we know and be able to do this stuff too, and to give them credit that they deserve for these things too. We've got our acknowledgements, patrons from Patreon listed in here, crowd forgers. You guys, if any of you are hanging out, you'll even see your name listed around here too. And a brief introduction with a QR code. The QR code goes to our cryptmonkey.net site, which is where most of the public things are listed for the plane. Need to go add some more, actually. I haven't added anything in a while. But yeah, this is fun. Like, not every section, but some of the sections we have some artwork and then a quote from some important person in the world. One of the most important researchers, one of the most well-known researchers in the world is Eben Skivers. And he says, one of the many wonders of Kethar is the plain star flower. It only blooms after having been washed in a prairie fire. If plucked before it dries, the flower becomes the most important ingredient in the Agdal farmer's burn salve. So these people we have listed up here for crowd forgers. It was a crowd forger that came up with that idea that we would have this. I say that, and it could be Dawn too. Without looking at my notes, I don't know for sure, but it was while we were crowd forging, either Dawn or a crowd forger, I know it wasn't me, came up with this idea of the medicinal properties of this plant. And it was maybe a group thing after that too, that then somebody else said, well, maybe it only happens after it's been a prairie fire or something like that. And there's some other things that have to do with that even people in the world don't completely understand why it works. But like I said, some of our sections have got these images that go along with them and quotes. This one, I could be wrong. I think it was Samwise came up with this character in the world, Captain Thunderbeard. He's a storm pirate. He's of the Storm Pirates, which are a land pirate group on the plane. So not exactly, they act like swashbucklers maybe, but they're not on the ocean. They're on the vast sea of the plane, so to speak. But he says, people venture out onto the plane fearing unicorns and acid storms, but that's not what kills them. It's a lack of focus. They get lulled into that big empty space and forget that it's not empty at all. That's fun. We've got these quotes and stuff with some of these pictures and things like that. So the part that we're looking at tonight is going to go here at the end of the story. I'll probably have some sort of a call to action to get people to join the newsletter or something like that. And then we'll have the first half of the story we're looking at tonight, Storm Runners. Now this, what I've just showed you here, Murder in the Shallow Valley, is a novella. So it's a little longer than a short story, but it's not as long as a novel. This is only about 24,000 words. 100 and so many, 118 pages long. And that's with a blank or a picture page just before a section starts. So it's 18 sections. It's not huge. It'll be a nice dramatic entry into one tiny little corner of Kethar on the plane. It takes place at the southern end of the plateau. The plateau, if you don't know, is where they grow the Agdal berries, which is a very important product in the world. So at the end there, like I showed you, like I said, a call to action, like check out these websites or whatever, join our newsletter, that kind of thing. And then we're going to have the first half of Storm Runners. And Stormrunners is what we're actually going to look at tonight. Because like I said, it's really close. All we're going to really look at is the first section. I just need to look it over one more time and make sure I don't see anything else that gets goofy. And for anybody that likes to write, I think probably the second best way... Well, let me explain. The second best way to figure out that you may have clunky sentences is simply reading it out loud to yourself. So we're going to read it out loud. I'm not going to do what I think is the best way. My personal technique for finding clunky sentences and things like that is I will actually read to myself in a monotone voice. I don't know why that helps, but it really helps. Like, I guess what it is, it takes all that emotion and inflection out, and maybe even my reading pattern changes to be more robotic and precise as opposed to letting my voice flare away problems. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, what we're going to work on here shortly. And we're going to be looking at it in the tool that I actually write in. Anyway, Scrivener is the tool I use. For anybody that's not familiar with that, it's a really good tool. I actually found out about Scrivener because I was looking for something that would be decent to use while I was planning campaigns for tabletop role-playing. And I hadn't heard of it. And then somebody, on a post or something maybe, mentioned, this is what I use. It's actually for writing, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, that's perfect. I'm sure lots of people like me that run role-playing games and stuff like to write too. It's probably how the tool was discovered by GMs or DMs. I think ever since I learned about the tool, I've been using it more for writing, actually, which is what it's for. More for writing than even organizing my games. And this is what it looks like. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. The things I like about Scrivener are, first of all, it's just got sort of I guess you could say it's a regular Explorer style organization on the left, where you have these sort of folder looking, they are folders that I use. In this case, they're my short story names, because this is the short story book file that we're looking at here. Get a little sneak peek there. You can see Gareth and the Golden Cops. We're going to make a video of that eventually here pretty soon. Hopperjacks in the Garden, Doc Cogg's Parts, Ruins of Dark Crush. I don't think this one isn't written, and I'm not. If everything goes well, I'm not even writing it. Another creator that I know is going to write that one, I hope. So I need to talk to him again. Anyway, yeah, so you get a little sneak peek. You can see the names of the other short stories that are going to go in the short story book. But oftentimes when I'm using this, like for Terra Olds, for instance, they were just section numbers. But if I'm writing something that has chapter names, then that'll be the chapter there as the folder. And then these pieces in here are the actual text for that section or chapter of what you're writing. One of my favorite things is that you have these, I think they're called index cards here. So instead of, like before this, I would actually write out, to a great deal anyway, something like the outline you learn how to do in school. And I find this, for me personally, is like, I might still write a shorter outline, not big like I used to do though. And then for a few more details, I use these index cards. And these index cards are great because you can kind of lay out your whole story before you've even written it. They're basically just notes. And then when you're in that section, like this is for section 1, then you see off to the right here, this is the card. So you have your notes right there as you're writing to kind of see where you want it to go with that section or chapter. So that's kind of neat. But yeah, I love this tool. This is not only for games anymore for me. Now it's also what it's meant for. It's for writing your novel or whatever. So I'm not going to be doing the monotone thing because I am too self-conscious to do that in front of all of you. But for anybody that's interested in, I think, a very decent way to get rid of clunky sentences, the monotone voice is great. Just read it to yourself in a monotone voice, and then for whatever reason, that just for me makes run-on sentences and stuff like that just stand out big time. So what I am going to do is I am going to do a read through normally. My inflection, I've done my monotone and stuff like that, so I think this is going to be hopefully fun for anybody watching, and a good way for me to still pick out anything that seems uncomfortable and needs to be smoothed out and I'll probably fix it right here in front of you, whether you like it or not. So again, before I start reading here, the name of the story is Storm Runners. A little bit of premise, I guess. So Storm Runners are a group of researchers of different sciences, and they stay out in front of the storm. I guess that needs a little explanation too. Our project is called The Plane, and it's really about the world of Kethar. People of Kethar landed on the planet from Earth. They were from Earth, landed on Kethar about 3,000 years ago, and went through this huge cataclysm that occurred. When that cataclysm occurred, it basically wiped out all of their high-tech everything, destroyed their robots. Oh, hi, Ghosty. How you doing? It's going pretty good here. I'm afraid the sound alerts aren't hooked up in here, and I thought that the thing would stop showing them when I disabled the sound alerts thing in my studio in the creator, but unfortunately it seems to leave it in there, I guess, even though I disabled it once I've already started the stream. So sorry about that. It would have been nice to hear that Duck of Doom again. So 3,000 years ago, all of their tech got wiped out by a cataclysm. It's going pretty good, Ghosty says. Been too long, and it's okay. Dawn's the one who gets scared anyway. I love that you think that. So a cataclysm occurred, and that cataclysm wiped out all of their high tech and kind of scattered them all over the place. The distances on this world are huge. People were very far away from each other once they got separated. So the way that they name things is interesting. Like we say the plane, the name of the project is the plane. They'll name big impacting things very literally. So it's with a capital T all the time, the plane. And the storm is similar to the plane in that if you're talking about some light rainstorm that went over your village or something like that, and oh, did you see the storm the other night? Everybody knows you're just talking about a local storm that went by. But there's something about the way that people emphasize it maybe to each other that when you say, did you hear about what happened at the storm? You know, everybody also knows what you mean there. The storm is this huge storm that has been circling the south end of the plane since long before people were on the planet. And it's massive. In fact, I'm going to have a description here that I'm going to read in a little bit. Ghosty says, most tech was destroyed, but some people, like some good-hearted assassin with a golden reputation, got their hands on it. That's right. That's right. This Golden Ghosty's talking about an important hero in the world that's named after Golden Ghosty. So yeah, people know when you say the plateau, the plane, the storm. Even though it seems like a fairly generic thing to us, it's people get it. They know it. It's just such a big, ominous thing in the world that they understand whatever you're talking about in those cases. But the storm's huge, and I even have a description in this first section that will get read here shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and try to read through this. Forgive me for any stutters or whatever. I'm having a small glass of wine. But we'll see what you think. Ghosty, just so you know, I know you read, or you may have read Storm Runners because it was a short story in the welcome package. This is a new first section for that story. So even if you've read it, this is new at least. All right, here we go. Tempest Master Kenrick Rhodes leaned back in his chair and stretched his whole body, pushing his fingers and his toes as far from each other as he could. Adding to the stretch, he performed a kind of wide-mouthed yawn you only ever do when you know you're alone. The twins still hid behind the eastern horizon, and the 4 out of Kethar's 6 moons that had risen in the night had already dipped out of sight. Darkness enveloped the Storm Runners expedition as most of its members slumbered. The cooks were starting breakfast, and the Merc Night Guards were still on watch, but the rest of the mobile camp members were curled up comfortably in their beds, except for Kenrick, who sat inside the top of the camouflage tower that shot up from the Tempest Master's landship. Night shift was nearing its end, and Tempest Master Rhodes had just entered his most recent notes on the storm. Kenrick had entered the same text on every line that night, and even the logbook seemed weary of the redundancy. Quarter-hour check. No change. The young Tempest Master was not bored, though, just tired. Working with the Storm Runners was a dream job. Staying ahead of the massive ancient storm as they collected data from the beast was quite fulfilling. It was also considerably safer than the Storm Chasers expedition, who followed behind the monster. Storm Runners rarely dealt with violent offshoot storms springing from the head of the larger mass. However, the Storm Chasers had to be constantly vigilant, as the storm often dropped orphans from its tail. Those orphan storms could produce giant twisters, large hail, and lightning. Neither expedition was truly safe, though. Even if you ignored the storm, both groups faced the menace of the plane every day. And even the leading edge of the storm could be unpredictable. But the Storm Runners were thankful they did not have to face gale winds and flying debris on a weekly basis. Kenrick leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He only had about an hour to go, and Tempest Master Denai Smith would relieve him. 4 more storm checks and 4 more log entries. Then I'm off to bed, he thought. He rubbed his knuckle into his eye, trying to force the tired away a little longer. When the alert clacker sounded once unexpectedly, he still had his knuckle pressed into his eye socket. The loud slap of the clacker's paddles gave him a start, and he jerked, sending his knuckle into his eyeball like a painful little punch. He gasped at the sharp injury and knew a headache was in his near future. One slap from the alert clacker was meant to draw the Tempest Master's attention to the storm. It meant that something odd was occurring, and that had not happened for almost 3 months. The last time it happened, the storm had spat out 6 large and angry-looking twisters to the south. They marched out of the face of the storm wall and churned the surface of the plane wildly for 20 minutes. Realizing he'd frozen in his chair, Kenrick knew he needed to stand up and look through the peep slot. It only slapped once, not 3 times, he thought. Get up and see what's what. Kenrick peered through the oversized peep slot and saw the storm wall resting on the flat expanse of the plain. It stretched as far as the eye could see to the north and the south. At just under 5,000 feet tall, the storm didn't even reach the big fluffy clouds that floated over it. Above the storm, Tempest Master Rhodes could even see distant stars twinkling in the black. Below that scene of serenity, the storm wall churned with ferocity. Occasionally, the mass erupted with the flash of yellow-orange lightning that foretold of deep, menacing rumbles to come. As menacing and gigantic as all that might seem. See, already here we go. This is why I'm doing this. I'm going to come back to this. I won't do it right now, but I don't like how close together these 2 words are. As menacing and gigantic as all that might seem, none of it was new. This was merely the normal state of the storm. The Tempest Master's eyes flitted from north to south and top to bottom. The Merc Guard were a no-nonsense bunch. They would not have alerted the Tempest Master's landship without reason. Tempest Master Rhodes was about to step away from the peep slot and send a runner to determine what purpose the alert held. Then the storm changed and his eyes widened as he saw the purpose. He'd have gasped again if his throat hadn't constricted, choking off the attempt to inhale. His heart pounded. Oh, see? Look at that. His heart pounded. This is why I'm doing it. That's why I'm doing it, folks. His heart pounded in his ears, drowning out the quiet undercurrent of sound that had surrounded him a moment before. All right, that's new. Twisting the knobs below his chin, he zoomed in with the peep slot's specialized glass, adding a touch of focus. The event stood out clearly on the face of the normally turbulent storm wall. A band stretching across the entire bottom of the storm appeared smooth. Rather than the thrashing clouds that defined the behemoth's wall at ground level, horizontal waves pulsed rhythmically as they shifted down towards the ground. Orbs of green and blue light appeared and disappeared in random positions across the band of smooth storm wall. Slap! The alert clacker sounded again, and Tempest Master Kenrick Rhodes pushed back from the peep slot in surprise. He'd not yet given the alert response, so the Merc Guards were reiterating the alert. Realizing he was still holding his breath, Kenrick exhaled fully and stepped towards the alert clacker. After responding to the Mercs, he rushed back to the peep slot, snatching his notebook and pencil as he went. First, I'll write down the behavior, he thought. Then I'll go to High Tempest Master. To the High Tempest Master. I'm just like rushing through things, aren't I? So that's our new first section that we just wrote and added to what was a 7-section story is now an 8-section story. Most of the story, Ghosty, is the same after this, cleaned up, albeit. That's what I was saying earlier before you got on, is that basically where we're at now with this is it's at a just like what you've read was more of a draft, a 1 or 2 draft or something like that. And we're getting it up to, this is good enough to show to an editor. That's where we're getting it. But see, that's great. I found, where's that menacing? I don't like those being so close together. I'm gonna have to find that. Oh, there it is. I don't even need that there. And I think I looked at this before and just forgot to remove it. I think it's probably good enough with just occasionally the mass erupted with the flash of yellow-orange lightning that foretold of the deep rumbles to come. I think that's good. Sometimes you say too much. And then I don't have the word menacing a few words away from the word menacing. Yeah, so Ghosty says, that was really cool to hear. Reading out loud is really great to catch mistakes, but that was awesome. Yeah, and actually the way, and I know how this slipped through. I can explain, I sort of cheated, I guess. So my favorite way of finding mistakes like that is reading in a monotone voice, and then when you do that, everything just stands out like black and white whenever a sentence is a run-on sentence or it's worded funny or anything like that. So I had done that with this. And then afterwards I came back and added some parts. This is one of the things I added. And didn't reread with my black and white monotone voice. But yeah, reading out loud at all. I'd say my second favorite way is just reading it like I just did. That finds lots of stuff, but to really go through and find things on your own, reading in a monotone voice just picks those things out quickly. There's something else now I've already forgotten. I'm gonna have to go through it again, aren't I? I had misspelled that word, and that's the same thing happened there. This is one of the things that I came back and enhanced a little bit. So of course I effed it up. Monotone voice, good advice. I'll definitely need to try that. Yeah, I'm just too self-conscious to do it on here because you feel like an idiot when you're doing it, but it helps. It's really helped me through the years, just clearing things up. But yes, one cool thing I think is that this speeds up the start of the story. It kind of sets the pace, hopefully much more quickly, that something's wrong. And also, I think this better describes, this has a good visual description, I think, of the storm. I think it was kind of pointed out to me before that really is just like, oh, there's a big storm. But it's obviously, it's way bigger than that. It's huge. So I think this does a good job of doing that. And just as sort of a side effect, Kenrick is not in the story as much. So this kind of gave him a little bit more play in the story without just sort of being silly. Just sort of being, I don't want to say he's silly. I guess he's in the former first section, he's introduced, but he's kind of like Rimmer's a little bit annoyed with him whispering in an empty land ship and stuff like that. So that's cool too that Kenrick gets a little bit, because he's not in the story very much. Now he's in it, obviously he's in the first section. But most of the story we follow Rimmer Tolstoy, the High Tempest Master. We sort of follow him through most of the story until the last section or two. We spend some time with his friend the cook as well, who I, of course, his name just completely left me. That's annoying. When you really, I really like the character, but I can't think of what their name is. Mark Barku. That's it. Yeah. So Mark Barku, I think, kind of, if I remember right, is going to control the end, or near one of the last couple of sections, and then the rest of it is just following High Tempest Master Tolstoy around as he prepares for this event and prepares for a project that they're about to do, and is trying to figure out if he should let the project go on because of these changes with the storm. Ghosty says, I read the story long enough that I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but from what I remember, this was a really solid addition. The description was awesome, definitely helped to visualize the storm more. Then, of course, I like the tension that seems to rise. Excuse me. He goes from a laid-back dude ready to kick back and take a nap to seemingly panicked, which helps nail home the threat. Yeah, groovy. I dig it. Yeah, so we knew we needed to do something there to spark the beginning of the story a little bit more, but hopefully that does it. Hopefully it'll help to get people more interested as well. For anybody that's joined recently, what we've been doing tonight is I showed some of the book design, and we looked at the book design, book cover, and for the novella that's coming out soon. And what we've been looking at now is part of the short story Storm Runners. And the reason we're looking at it so closely right now is because half of this story is going to be included at the end of the novella that's getting published very soon, like super soon. The book design's almost completely done. With this completed, a little bit of back matter to go in there. I'm going to be assigning an ISBN number to this probably before a week is up, and start the process of submitting it. Yeah, I don't know if you had seen Ghosty. I don't know if you had seen the video we did, or stream we did previously, maybe. Let's see if I can find this. So this is the artwork from the cover. I don't have I've got to go find the designed version here and maybe show that pretty soon, but this is the designed version of the cover without the titling and all that stuff on there. We had done a video. Man, I can't remember if it's on our YouTube for this or not. I guess not. I think I still have it to add. Oh, and by the way, I don't know. Maybe you already have. Let's see if I've got this here. Maybe you already have seen it. There it is. Oh, good. I'm glad you've seen it too. And maybe you saw it during that stream we did to show the artwork, and we showed what it looked like with titling and stuff on it with our font. It's pretty fun. I don't think you've seen these things though. Let me switch over here to the design. So this is the internal design that's done up to this point, which is almost completed. I honestly don't remember what streams I might have showed some of this on, but it's looking like a real book. There you are. And there you are. But yeah, I don't think I've shown this too much recently. There's a video. Oh yeah, they're on. Let me see. Make sure I'm not lying. Yeah, on that YouTube channel, there is a video that's showing this design and stuff much more. But like I go through a whole bunch of this actually. But yeah, so with its layout, just Murder in the Shallow Valley, not including the stuff we're talking about adding, because I don't know how many pages that's going to take yet, but just that story is 118 in the novella, 118 pages. And then, like I said earlier, I'm going to have some sort of a call to action, like come join our newsletter or something like that at the end. And then after, come join our newsletter or website bumps or whatever, then we're going to have the first half of this short story, Storm Runners. And that will hopefully make people get excited for when the short story book, which is going to come out next. Yeah, the 118 pages is how many pages just the novella story is itself. I don't know how many pages it's going to be with the short story and stuff in here added, but my guess would be, I don't know, 135 pages maybe with that. Something like that. That's a total guess that I'm yanking out of my rear end, but but yeah, that video, it's like a 7-minute video, I think, and I kind of went through all of this with a little more detail too. So if you get a chance, maybe check that out. But that's why I shared that YouTube channel too, because I don't know if you had seen that channel yet. But yeah, some of the sections we got a little bit of graphic artwork going on. It looks like heads. The one thing with the Adobe InDesign, the pictures will sort of, I guess, take up less memory or something, and then you've got to sit there for a moment while it really makes the picture look with it gives it a better resolution. But yeah, I mean, that's how close we are. I think I've announced, you were around when I announced before that we own a bunch of ISBN numbers now. I just haven't assigned one to the book yet. And so that's really what we're doing. We're going to assign an ISBN number, do a call to action at the end of the book, and add this first half of the short story to the end of the book. To hopefully people will get excited about the short story book coming out later. Totally feel like I'm skipping something, but oh, you know what it is? The only other thing on my mind is I want to look at front and back matter on a couple of other things within our genre scape, and see if anybody's doing, like, got cool ideas about call to actions and stuff like that, to see if I want to change any of that up a little bit. But that's really it. And then from there on, it's just the work of getting things properly loaded to all of the book platforms. Ghosty says, so I remember you talking about the artist you hired for the novella cover. Has he done anything else for y'all? He will be. I'm already planning to have him to do most or all of the artwork, as long as we're correct in this style. I mean, if we find out that it's not working out, we're not making sales, a lot of that honestly has to do with book covers. But hopefully it does well, because this is what I was hoping for. I'm excited about it. And he's even asked me a couple of times. As you know, we've been well behind, and he's touched base with me again to see if we're ready to start talking about the next thing, stuff like that. So he's aware that we're going to need him some more. It is bullshit. Everybody does that, right? Everybody judges a book by its cover. I'm trying to remember. I heard some other publisher or some other writer or something saying, never judge a book by its cover. Unless, of course, it's a book. Then you're going to want to look at the cover. Will he be doing stuff for the short story book? Yeah, that would be the next project. Excuse me. Is the cover of the short story book. And if we can get enough interest and we can keep going with this whole project, then after the short story book is the gaming things. So that'll be a lot of artwork that, as long as this is working, as long as this is moving forward, then yeah, I'm going to have him do or direct all of that artwork. And that's exciting too, is knowing that once we get these short story books done, or short story book rather done, then we'll be working on wrong one. We'll be working on the gaming stuff then. One of the things I think you hopped on after ghosty, but this is maybe not all of the stories that are going in the short story book, but it's a lot of them. It may be all, or maybe some of these have to get cut out. I don't know, because we have a word count we're trying to hit if this ends up being too long, but you kind of get a sneak peek at least, and maybe you recognize some of these names. Like I'm sure you've read Gareth and the Golden Cops, Copperjacks in the Garden. That's super exciting. Also excited for the short story book. Have y'all done a ton of planning for it? Like, what kinds of stories will be included? No, yeah, these are the stories that, at least for the moment, we think are going in. Zed's at the Edge is one you haven't read. It's one that you'll get to see ahead of time too, though, because its initial audience is going to be on Discord. You know, hey, Crowdforgers, check this out kind of thing. This is one, the Kern Guard. I don't think I have anything. Okay, good. There's nothing here yet. But it's not even started yet. But that's one that you're gonna like. That one, the hero of that is, if I remember right, it's mostly gonna be. I have to look at my notes. I think it's mostly gonna be a prequel to the hero, the Golden Ghosty. Like I'm gonna go back and talk about him before he has all his cool toys and stuff. So that's gonna be fun. This one, I keep thinking I'm gonna click on something I don't want to share, but because these notes pick up, like here, these notes, you know, might be easy to figure out what's going on somewhere, so I'm trying not to click on stuff I don't want to share things. But Death on the Olds Farm is cool because the novella Murder in the Shallow Valley is about Tara Olds, and Death on the Olds Farm is her history. And the one that I'd like to get in here, and I don't know if it's gonna, I might be speaking out of turn, it might be planned for stuff after the gaming content's done, like for the next short story book, but we're also going to revisit Tara Olds after she's left the farm in that valley. So basically you're going to get, this is when she's a kid, then you've got the novella of right now, what you might know about Tara Olds, and then what happens later after all of that happen, after everything happens in the novella. Do you have a theme you're keeping to? That's a really good question. So no. The theme is really, if I had to say there's a theme, it's like, look at all of this different stuff and we're barely scraping the edge of everything that is going on in this big world, right? Because people have all these, you know, personally haven't been involved in all these different cultures because everyone is so separated by this vast amount of space. So I think the theme is just like, this is very much a part of Cathar, but so is this, and so is this, so on. So I guess the thread running through it is that I want to introduce lots of different cultures in the book. While obviously expressing, hey, look at these giant creatures, but yeah, a prequel for Tara Olds, yeah. And that was planned like before I'd even, like maybe we just started the novella, and I be careful how I say this. Well, I'll say this. You know, having read the novella, for instance, that there are things, there's these big black holes in what's up with Tara Olds, and I didn't want to leave it completely like that. So I knew right away, even though I'm going to focus on this one horrific story, I wanted to tell a couple of other stories about what happened to her to get to this point, and what happens to her after she leaves the farm. Vague enough? I didn't want to leave that many holes out there for anybody that was actually interested after reading about Tara. I wanted there to be a way for them to see how it got to this place in her life, and instead of her just walking off into the sunset at the end, that, you know, there is more to come. That sounds really cool. So I'm guessing y'all narrowed down backstory and lore for him. Yes. Yeah, certainly I know what's up with the Golden Ghost from the point that the story is starting up until the point that you're more familiar with him, where he has the fun tech and stuff like that. But well, I mean, you can see the name of that story is the Kern Guard, so that kind of gives away a little bit of what has to do with his history. For anybody that knows about the Kern Kingdom. And that sounds really cool. Oh, and of course, a prequel to Ghosty, right? Did I mishear that? No, you didn't. No, that's what this short story is going to be, is a true sort of introduction to the Golden Ghost. Really excited to hear more about Tara. She was super fun. She was fun. And I'm planning on maybe doing like some TikToks too, to go through the emotions of writing it versus reading it. Which sounds goofy, I guess, but what I mean is just this: when I'm writing, I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome, and then I would read parts out to Dawn, and I was like, I am a bad man. I'm a bad man. I am terrible. It was fun to write, difficult to reread over, like, my messages are being wonky and sending out of order, so this is weird. Oh wow, that is weird. I remember us discussing the possibility of him being a former Kern. Golly, that's good. So that's really exciting. I have no idea if it's something you'd share outside of the story, but I'd love to hear anything you can or you are willing to share. Well, it's kind of easy to share some of this stuff because I haven't even started. I'm not letting anything go about the specific story, but what I've narrowed down on him to begin with is that he has kind of humble beginnings, and he has this he has an upbringing that what he had of an upbringing was very much you should try to do the right thing. And then obviously, like many people, he has interests in things like adventuring and stuff like that, the sort of young, idealistic, exciting ideas that we all have, right? But as he gets a little bit older, he starts to actually go down the path of learning some of these things, and he is from the Kern Kingdom, and one of the early things he does, and honestly one of the things that I'm kind of playing with the idea that everybody in the Kern Kingdom has to do, is that they have to be a soldier for a certain amount of time. In any case, he is going to start out as a soldier in the Kern army. Just a low ranking nothing. But the story is basically going to surround how he gets kind of disillusioned, in that, he begins with this strong respect for the idea of, let's do the right thing, let's do the lawful thing, let's help and protect people. And he's of course put through situations where the right thing isn't happening around him, and he starts to lose respect for some of the groups he's with and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of the beginnings I think I want to write about for him, is just this struggle to work hard, learn how to be a gifted fighter, and being disillusioned by people around him who he would have expected to have the same sort of ideals that he has, and they don't. And their ideals are a little grimier than he would like. So that enough? I don't. I kind of feel like I still didn't say anything, but that's kind of at the core of his character. I'll say that. The core of his character is he wants the right thing to happen for people who deserve it, and more often than not, he's witness to the wrong thing happening to people who don't deserve that. Now, one story that, and I'm definitely speaking out of turn here because I haven't talked to Dawn yet. Oh, hold on a second. The decision between right and wrong in a situation of war is hard, especially when those around have different ideas, right? That's absolutely true. And you know about the Kern Nation, that they're very warful. I'll call them warful. Mainly it's thrust upon them just because people want to come and take their land. But the thing is when he's in, is one of those, when he's a soldier, it's one of those gaps where there's not some big invasion going on. It's kind of more like business as usual, occasionally deal with bandits or something like that, but he's not at the front lines of one of these big kingdoms coming after them or something like that. And for those that don't know, the reason the Kern Kingdom, I think for the last 800 years, I'm sort of speaking off the cuff here, for the last 800 years, they've pretty much been at war with no bigger gaps than like 25 or 50 years or something like that. And then they'll go to war again, and then they go to war again, and then they go to war again. So they're first, financially, they're known as the people who have a specific animal that doesn't breed anywhere else. Secondly, they're known financially by being really the people who have the best weapons. And then, of course, the reason they have the best weapons and the reason they're always at war for those animals is they're just always fighting the people that come up and want to take over. But they've been running the joint. So yes, I agree with that, but they're not like technically in a state of war while he's a soldier. And I think this is just like he's a soldier for a couple of years and then starts working down his adventuring path. What was I going to say? Something about that isn't in here. Oh, so one of the things that's not in here right now, and I'm definitely speaking out of turn because I haven't talked to Dawn about it yet, is there will be a short story. Like I said, I need to talk to Dawn. There will be a short story, but it may not be till the second book, and I'm kind of wondering if we don't want to put it in this first one that talks about Mark. Mark is a really big deal. He's the biggest hero in the world, and everybody knows about Mark in that he's even become part of their vernacular. Anybody who's seen the posts I leave on Patreon has seen the Mark save you. He's a godlike hero. So we have plans for a story about Mark. Actually, we have plans for a short story that's about the birth of this legend of Mark. And it was going to be in the second short story book, but I kind of, just the last couple of days, I've been thinking, well, maybe we just throw it in here. Let everybody in on that knowledge and that understanding sooner, you know? Especially, it'd be nice to have this out there before the gaming content so that the people have an understanding of the whole Mark story before they're sitting around a table throwing dice. Ghosty says, so is this going to cover how he goes from Kern explorer to somewhat anti-hero he is currently? No, this short story is just... It's just going to be kind of a brief background on him and his upbringing, and then the main part of the story is while he's a soldier, and I think probably ending when he ends his career as a soldier for the Kerns. Um, and I say he's going towards his adventuring path, and I think probably he does it the way a lot of people do, which is, with some exceptions, the if you will, the melee and the distance fighter type adventurers, they start out usually, not in every case, but usually as a mercenary. And I think that's probably what he's going to do. And in my mind, when I kind of timeline him in my mind, he leaves the current army to go and be a merc that works for getting people on and off the plane out of Longshore or something like that. Uh, oh, I've been hearing about Mark for years, so that's fun. That's the other thing, is if we just kind of give up his story now, then everybody that has had to listen to me say Mark save you a million times will kind of get in on it and know what's the big deal about Mark. That story was one of the first stories that we sort of started loosely making notes on. I won't even say outlining, but we have a good idea of what that story is like, and it'll be told kind of fun too. I think it'll be told in sort of that style of the, was it a 100 Arabian Nights, where the story is told by a storyteller kind of thing. That's the current idea anyway. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that one, and I wonder if holding on to the legend of Mark is, I wonder if it's not better to not hold on to that information and just let it go before we start building gaming content. You know, it'll be a nice thing for people to know when they're sitting around the table, and it'll be fun for people to know about that just like the stories or whatever. So the more I think about it, I think I'm gonna talk to Dawn and see if we don't move that guy up. Unfortunately, it means something here could possibly come out, but that's okay, because that Legend of Mark story is also more the swashbuckling adventure type story, and I don't know, maybe something like Flight Test could come out or something like that. Flight Test is going to be a fun story too, but it's more of the inventor's adventure kind of thing. So swashbuckling adventure could be more fun to replace that one and have that one be later, or some other piece of content for something else. I don't know. Ghosty says, in my mind, that makes perfect sense. If his life is surrounded by warriors forever his whole life, and he himself was a warrior, I can imagine that's all he'd know to do. But he can still do his exploring and do gooding with those skills. Yeah. And I think that's in my mind, that's always been why a lot of, like I say, mainly the melee and the fighting type people, you know, your sharpshooters and stuff like that, that they will start out in mercs, because mercs require like 6 months of a basic training. Most of the companies do. So you get a whole lot of fight craft going on before you actually face anybody. Mercs are badasses, even if they don't become adventuring class type people. Although I was like really going through this in my head over the last couple of days. The truth is, an adventuring class could be just about anything. It's just whether or not somebody wants to take certain steps in their life, right? If they want to go looking for that lost treasure or save the town or whatever, they could be, well, we got Tempest Masters. They could be heroes. They're weathermen, basically, right? They're weathermen and they're meteorologists, and they could take the right steps to save someone. Ghosty says, I'm so torn. On one hand, I love Mark being a legend, but I also want to know his story, you know? Yeah. Yeah, and we planned out having it in the second book. partly just because it'd be fun to continue this whole thing without everybody really fully being let in, because people in the world aren't really fully let in. It's not like it's too big. They know stories about Mark. They don't actually know Mark, right? So it's kind of cool in the sense that you're almost like the people in the world, in that you hear this and you say it and you maybe even believe strongly about this person you hear about all the time, but you don't actually know anything about them. I could be misremembering, but doesn't Ghosty become one of those like elite assassin type people? I could be making that up, but isn't there like an elite group of mercenaries that Ghosty joins? Yes, he is. I'm gonna have to pull up my notes. You actually caught me on this one. Or maybe I've just had too many glasses of wine. I don't remember. I have notes on Golden Ghosty's background, and I don't think the word I'm looking for is in here. It's not, because of course when I wrote the notes, that was on the tip of my tongue all the time. But let me see, where is my adventuring classes? Where is it? Oh, there it is. I can tell you specifically, which I honestly think that you crowdforged this name. Yep, Ghosty named it. So he is a stalker. You did. I guess you did, man. It's such a big world. When I'm writing, when I'm planning a layout, even when I'm planning the layout of a story, I will have notes open from all of these things that we've done to put in the right names and place names and people names and animal names and all of this stuff that we've worked on over the years. I have those on the side, and then I try to take those names and get them in the right place in my notes, because I don't remember. It's a lot of stuff. I had a whole lot of ideas and stuff written down before we ever started doing the crowd forging, and then the crowd forging, we got a whole bunch of new stuff. Yeah, Plague Doctor is one I talked about earlier, and Rock Fan came up with that. Yeah. Stalker, that's it. Golden Ghosty's a stalker. Wait, that sounds bad. Only in the context of our world, I guess. I don't know. But there's no such thing as stalkers. They're like one of those secret guilds. So everybody knows they're there, but they're not real. There's no such thing, is what, the leaders of that guild would say. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to have some more short stories later too, before he becomes a stalker. At least one more maybe before he becomes a stalker. Because obviously he doesn't get all of his cool gear and stuff until then. But he's a badass fighter without all of the ancient tech. So it'd be kind of cool to follow him along on one of his trips through the plane or something like that as a mercenary. An organization that doesn't really exist. That's right. But go back to the correct window here. But yeah, I'm considering that at least, and I have a little bit of time. I'm writing most of these stories. Ruins of Dark Crush, I am not At this point, I'm not going to write that one. Another writer friend of mine is going to write that story. Damaged Microbe is how folks would know him on Twitch. As long as everything goes well, then he and I are going to develop that story together, and then he's going to write it. Most of the other ones I'm going to write. But the neat thing about Ruins of Dark Crush is that it actually comes from it's going to be the short story to a campfire story that I did write a year ago or something like that. About these adventurers being saved by Mark, actually. And Mark gets them out of this underground area and saves the day, sort of thing, as they're in a lot of trouble. But the difference between campfire stories, for those who may not know, the difference between campfire stories and the novels, novellas, the short stories, campfire stories are always in that group of there's something wrong with the story, it's not right, there's something wrong. So this is going to be the story that basically it'll set it correct. This is what actually happened, regardless of the campfire story you heard about. Do you have a story for how he gets this super secret tech? I have not thought about that specific. I've not thought about writing that specific story, but I do have some ideas. It was definitely, like I said, after he's a stalker and he just sort of falls into. It's basically like he's on a job to do something. And while he's doing that job, I think he's like, hey, what's that thing? And I think we talked about before that the thing that he has that does that for him is actually sort of broken. And it's working the way it's working because it's broken. It actually has different intentions and stuff. They are told by people, they could be made up, they could be exaggerated. That's what makes them campfire stories. Yeah, and even if it's relatively new, because the world is so big, you're also getting that information via the telephone game. You know, rarely, sometimes somebody says, well, I was there, and this is the story or whatever, and it's still a campfire story. That something isn't right? But oftentimes they're telling you a story that they heard from someone else who heard it from, this line of 30 different people over a course of several years have told this story before you hear it. But Doc Cog's parts, that can't go. I gotta leave that one in there. Doc Cog's parts, I don't know if you've Golden Ghosty, if you got to read that one or not. Hell, is it even done? Yeah, it's done. But it was like I just described about Ruins of Dark Crush. It was campfire story, and this is the short story that sort of sets the story straight. But I don't know if I'm saying that because I don't know if I released that one to patrons. I think I did, but oh, I know how to tell it relatively easily here. Maybe. Yeah. Oh, I shared it at the end of last year, though. But, anyway, it's the same sort of thing where it was a campfire story. You heard this version of the story things were left out. Maybe some people were looked at heroically when they could have been a little more villainized. That kind of stuff happens in the stories. So of course, if you have ideas, go with those, but I'm just spitballing. What if the way he gets the tech is morally questionable to him? Maybe there's a job he does and he has to do something he struggles to sleep with, and that's how he gets the tech, because it was something he isn't proud of. He really puts more focus on using it for good to kind of right his wrongs. That's a clever little tool right there. I like that. Yeah. I might very well do that. That's a pretty good idea. Like trying to think of something. It almost makes me think of the Tolkien rings or something, where, you know, like the elves know these aren't necessarily cool, but I'm going to try to use it anyway, and I'm going to try to do good with it for the elf people or whatever, right? But that's interesting. I like that. It wasn't nice how I got this, but now I'm going to use it nice. I think it says something too that he became a stalker anyway, with this wish to do good. Considering the stalkers often are not. They're often, I don't care who you want me to kill, you just pay me the right amount of money and I'm going to kill him, or I'm going to rough him up, or whatever sort of either physical violence or the threat of physical violence. That's sort of their bread and butter. Sneak in, kill them, whatever. So it kind of says something that he got to a point in his life where that's where he ended up too. I don't know that part. I can't lie and say I know how he goes from being, because obviously he's a stalker and you've seen him do things as a hero, but I think there's some things, maybe there's a time in there where he was just sort of like F everybody or something. Because while he's a merc, I still see him as trying to do the right thing before he's moved on to the next part of his life. But most people who, like I said, most people who are stalker, they kind of have to have some moral ambiguity in order to pull that job off. Ghosty says, oh, I got an idea. Perhaps he gets a job to kill someone who he is told is an evil person. Maybe he's told that they are some kind of evil ruler or murderer. After he fatally injures the guy, he realizes that the things he's told were lies and the guy isn't as bad. And so from there on, he really focuses on getting the whole story before a job. Yeah, that's not bad too. Maybe I'm going to have you write this one. When we get to that, the grab the tech part. Yeah, we might have to do that. See if you've got time to do that later, huh? You're going to regret saying that. Well, I'm almost done with my bottle of wine. And I'm probably going to pop off of here. But if anybody has any questions while I'm sitting here for this little bit left, go for it. Really excited to see all of these shorts. Sounds super fun to me. Yeah. Well, I do have... things are getting lined up. It's just a matter of getting to that point. Like, once the stories are all written, I'm not going to be editing these either. I have, so the writer that I'm expecting to write Ruins of Dark Crush, I'm expecting that he's also going to be the editor for the rest of the stories, and then I'll edit Ruins of Dark Crush, and that's it. So we have a little bit of honesty in editing there. But that's lined up. That's how this is going to work on that one. Unless something changes between now and then, Sid Quaid is going to do the cover art for that book as well. Yeah, it's kind of lining up. I mean, we got a lot in here. Let me see if I can. Remember how to do this. Thought it was. That's not it. Oh, there it is. I kept reading over it. Oh, it's considered a different app, so you guys can't see it. Hold on just a second. Right now, the project... Yeah, wow. Right now, the project, which is clearly incomplete for the short story book, is already over 43,000 words. And my target for this book is between 50 and 75. So it's actually pretty close with just what's in there. Obviously, if this went in and I had a bunch of editing right now, then theoretically that word count's going to go down a bit. But that's still pretty high considering a bunch of this isn't even done yet. So we just about have a book here already as far as size and that I was targeting. Oh, away you. But yeah, there's a chunk of work to go, but it's coming along. It's just, as you may know, we have our regular business too. We've gone through so many changes in the last year as far as how we do things and who gets to do what work and stuff like that, where it's been a mess trying to keep a structured this is when I'm writing sort of thing going. But we're working on it anyway. This Zed's at the Edge story is pretty cool. I'm going to be excited. Like I said, this one, once it's done to pre-editor stage probably, or maybe even drafted before that. I don't know. In some readable form, I'll get the Zeds at the Edge out announced on Discord for Crowdforgers, because it's just gonna be a fun story. I think one of the cool things about it is, and maybe you've heard me talk about this before, one of the things that towns do to keep the travelers safe coming in and out is they will put what they call castles sort of spread out in a line and outside at the edge of their territory sort of thing. One of the easy ways I can describe this, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Oh, I think this is gonna work. Hey, bringing up the map real quick. Oops. Whoops. I'm going to get the map just so I can give you an example of what I mean. So here's Longshore, and then they have this distance between them and the edge of the plain. Like even here, they're sort of on the plain. Let's work. Hey, that works. that thing's in the way. Okay, so you've got the stretch of the town following this side of Cathar's Tier. And out here, what they've done as being the largest, most wealthy town, they try to protect people leaving their town to go onto the plain and people coming towards the town off of the plain. And they have this stretch spread out many days apart between these castles. But what the castles do is you can tent out sometimes inside the castle grounds or outside the castle grounds, and if something happens, then you have a stronghold to run to, basically. Now, a castle it's not like you're thinking. Basically, it's probably a 2 or 3 story tower, just a tower, surrounded by walls that are going to be at least 18 foot tall. And then with heavy wood doors and stuff like that to be able to get inside of the grounds or even inside of the tower and away from whatever wants to eat you. And it's kind of a public service that they do this. So Zed's at the Edge takes place near one of those at a really it's big distances, and people don't cross paths very often, right? But you're close enough to a town that at one of these castles there might be another 2 groups, right? But this story takes place when there just happens to be like 20 something groups, and people are tenting out with quiet camp screens and stuff outside of the castle walls, and just everybody's trying to be quiet and stuff. But that's sort of the setup for that story. Obviously things are going to go wrong, but that's going to be a fun story, a good kind of horror-based story. And part of that's what I love so far, is we spent all that time doing crowd forging and stuff, and a lot of it depends on the story, I guess, but a lot of the driving concepts and a lot of the small details and stuff like that are things that came out of crowd forging. And a big driving concept in this one came from crowd forging. So that's going to be a fun story. That's why immediately when I thought of the story, I'm like, this has just got to go out. Like we'll put it in a short story, but it's got to go out first to crowd forgers, but before it gets edited or whatever, you know. But that's going to be a fun one, I think. Oh. It's definitely going to be one that's on the horror side more than adventure. It's horror, and my main character is a mother with her 2 kids with her, and she's alone. So it's gonna be a rough one. At least I hope it is. If I do it right, it's gonna be a rough one. Oh, you know, I love the horror, gritty stories, so much potential. Yeah, me too. Like even, so Murder in the Shallow Valley it's one of our black label stories, which means it's true and it's not high fantasy swashbuckling kind of stuff. It's closer to ground level. If this were real, this was the kind of stuff you'd see on a day-to-day basis, that kind of life. And I enjoyed how gritty it is, even though it was difficult, like, to reread and stuff like that. Like I was saying, I feel like a bad person, but I guess I enjoyed it because it kind of adds that realness to this big, in a lot of ways, your typical fantasy sci-fi sort of story. You know what I mean? Like it takes this big, that's a fun game world sort of idea, and then makes it dirty and real. While still being fantastic, I think. At least in its concept. Well, my glass of wine is done. And I appreciate you hanging out, Ghosty, and anybody else who's been hanging out, maybe in the background or whatever. Thanks for being here. I don't know when I'm going to do something like this again soon. I want to get back into doing more things like this again. It's not as fun, I think, as Dawn painting, and she's too busy to paint now. But maybe it's fun for folks to sit around and chat about dark fantasy and stuff anyway. Ghosty says, I think extreme fantasy has its place all the time, but in my mind, real life has a lot of darker things, and incorporating that really brings out the realism. Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the Hopperjacks in the Garden. That's another one that the short story books, obviously it's going to be a mix of these sort of, this is what life's really like here, and swashbuckling adventure sort of stuff, right? And Hopperjacks in the Garden is kind of how I felt about that one too, that it was, I mean, the main characters there are sort of an elderly couple, right? So to me that was very, this is life. Specifically, this is life on the edge of the plane, and it's not all that easy anywhere. So but yeah, so I think I'm gonna run. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope you had fun. And yeah, we'll see you soon. I'm gonna at least keep updates going in Discord, on the Patreon public posts. You'll see those too, where because we're really close to being able to say this is out there. This is on Amazon. This is on Kobo, wherever you buy your books. So Ghost says, this was a ton of fun. I always love brainstorming and stuff, so I really enjoyed it. Of course, I love the Ghosty character, so feel free to shoot me a DM anytime and we can brainstorm about this lore, and I'd also be happy to write any stories about him. Have a great night. I will absolutely do that. I'm not kidding. I'm seriously thinking this would be a good opportunity to get another writer involved too. So all right, you guys have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.